to lesson 30, domain and range. Here's what we're going to do. Last time we talked about domain and range, we used the terms input for domain, our x values, and for our output, we use the term range for our y values. So in this lesson, we're going to do two things. If we're given either pairs, a table, or a mapping diagram, or even a graph, we're going to be able to list the x values for a domain and the y values for range. Pretty simple. And then if we're given a continuous graph, we're going to identify the smallest and largest values, our minimum and maximum for our x and y values, and use inequality notation to identify domain and range. So let's start off with just looking at domain and range. And here I have coordinates on the table, I have a graph, and I have some mapping. So what do we see? What do we notice? Remember, domain are our x values, and the range are the y values. All right, so let's start listing the domain. And that means for the table, first I'm going to make this little symbol, which looks like a face to me. It really does. It looks like it's like a chin, a forehead, and a little nose. So I do that first. And let's start listing what the values would be in my domain. Now remember, I'm looking for a domain, so I actually write underneath the x. And for range, I write a little y to help me out. And so on my table, my domain, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I close, here's the little nose, I close the little face up. All right, let's try the same thing with range. I'm looking at my y values, which are here, so I do the same thing. 30, 20, 10, and 5. That's it. Let's try with the table, with the graph. And for this, the points are just on the graph. So all I'm really going to do is put the ordered pairs here. Matter of fact, no. Let's actually name them the way they really are. So the first one I have 130. So here's 130. My second point is 220. My third point is 310. And my fourth point is 45. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing again. For domain, I'm just going to put in my x values, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And let's do the same thing for my y values, 30, 20, 10, and 5. I'm going to try and do this a little more slowly. There we go. All right, let's do the same thing for our mapping diagram. It's the same. Here's our x, here's our y. Literally, I'm just going to copy these numbers in for domain and these for range. And that's it. It will take me longer to write it than it did just to say it. And again, just look, it's the same values. These are all the same domain and range, but I wanted you to recognize all the different ways they can be represented. My relations can be on a table, they can be points in a graph, or they can be a mapping diagram. But now you know how to identify and list those points. Hit pause and jot this down. So let's try finding domain and range on a continuous graph. And here I don't have a set of just points. If it was just a bunch of points, I would just list the coordinate pairs very easily. But being that this is continuous, I'm going to find the minimum and maximum for both. So I'm going to do my little shape again. They're curly brackets. They're just a way of showing a group. But I have a lot of trouble drawing it, and I think you might too. It's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. But for domain, remember, I'm thinking about my x, and I'm thinking about my minimum, what is the smallest, and what is the largest number. And I'm going to write this as an inequality. So looking here, I'm going to look at my x values. I notice it goes from here to here. Okay, so let's actually map that out. It's going from here to here. So that would be my minimum. So in this case, my minimum is when x is equal to -1, and my maximum is when x is equal to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 when x is equal to 6. So how am I going to write that down? I'm literally just going to put -1 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 6. That's it. So it's telling me that anything in that range from -1 to 6, my x can live in there. My x can be -1 and my x can be 6. So hit pause and jot this down. All right, let's do the same thing with y. I'm going to use a different color for y. And I'm going to look for my minimum, my lowest value, which is down here. And here's my maximum. The highest it goes is up here. So I'm going to do the same thing. This is where y is equal to -2. And the top part is where y is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so same thing. Draw my little shape. My smallest value first, -2, is greater or equal to y, sorry, less than or equal to y, which is less than or equal to 5. All right, I want to make sure I said that properly. All right, and that is my symbol for both and my inequality symbol, how I've written it down for domain and for range. So here's a thinking question. How would the domain and range be different if there were an arrow on the end of the right side? So let's say here there's an actual point on the left side, but on the right there was an arrow. What would be different? Let's think about this for a second. With our domain, what would change? Would the minimum value change? No, it would still be -1. But my maximum now has changed because this graph is going to go on forever and ever. So it's because of this little arrow is continuing on and on. So it definitely has an endpoint here, but x can keep going on. So how would it change? I would just write this, if there was an arrow at the end, as x is greater than or equal to -1. Why would I do that? Because this is going to go on and on forever on the other end. It's just going to keep going. So since it doesn't have an endpoint, I'm going to use that to say that it covers all the x values that are bigger than -1. How about for my range? What will be impacted? With my minimum or my maximum? Well, since my graph is going down, my maximum would be different. And in this case, that means y would be every number that is less than 5. So y is greater than or equal to 5. And this covers me for all of those values because it's going to go on again, on and on in this direction. And I just know that it's not going to get any higher than this. All right, so you take notice of that. Sometimes in your graphs, check and see, does it have an endpoint or does it have an arrow, because it does matter. Hit pause and jot this down into your notes.